Hello, everybody. It's Adrian Plus here,
Yes, and Bridget, for a surprise. Hello.
and unless I'm very much mistaken, today we are on number 234. Three. I think you beg your pardon. 233 of Sounding the Never-Ending Shallows, and still the news falls like some kind of bombshell all the time.
Yes, I'm very struck by the fact that this weekend is sort of we're looking. It's Advent, so we're starting to look at the idea of this baby that is going to be remembered in just a few weeks' time, and yet so much of our news is about small children not growing into something important and special. But I was listening this morning to news from Sudan, Adrian. Millions of people. Refugee situation, war situation, food poverty situation. Somebody described it as a polyhumanitarian crisis, which I've never
heard
really
that
heard
word.
before.
No.
But I think he was saying that it's a crisis in every single area you can possibly think of. And he particularly mentioned women and children, who are always the most vulnerable.
Mm.
And very hard to think that every single one of those children and those women and those people have a value when it becomes a number like that, millions.
Where do we discover our value of individuals, whether we know them or not?
Well, I suppose by meeting them in some way or another, whether it's reading about it or there was this guy, Tom Fletcher, on the radio saying it needs a voice. It needs a voice. And I think we've known that experience, Adrian. I mean, we've been to various countries with World Vision and with the charity Toy Box, haven't we? And feeling the part of the energy of these organizations is to give people a voice. To, I mean, our job was to come back and talk about it, wasn't it? Talk about the situations that we'd seen. And journalists have that same responsibility to report it, to make sure people are hearing what's actually happening, hidden away from view.
Of course, that's why when we've been to Africa and South America and places to not to actually do any practical work exactly, but to see what happens and what is needed. And I remember our confusion over that when we first encountered people who have appalling need. That there's something in you that wants to go and sort it out. If you had millions of pounds or something, you could walk around changing lives. But our function, our particular responsibility, was to. We had two little books, didn't we? One with A on the front, one with B.
Yes, oddly enough.
And we made notes all the time about disaster and terror in people's faces, about meeting small children at midnight in areas surrounded by gangs in the dark.
Gosh, that was scary. Yeah.
And I remember
That
that
was in
little
El Salvador.
it was El Salvador, and that little girl tucked under your arm. Do you remember? Who didn't want to do anything except just be there. And I remember afterwards supposing that, given that she obviously was in some way lost, that maybe she thought if she just tucked under there
I know.
and didn't move, maybe she would stay there and everything would be all right. And when you remember things like that, it makes it almost impossible not to look into the center of these masses of people and see an array of little faces of children who perhaps have begun to believe that things could be all right. And it's horrible. I can't stand it.
No, and I mean, I know that well, we're certainly not alone in the despair sometimes of seeing children in tears, just so bewildered by what's going on around them. But I suppose the only other thing that might give me hope, Adrian, is thinking of the toughness of some of these children that we have met and their determination to survive. And I think perhaps more than any, the two little boys that we met in Zambia this funny little place they call a village, which was Zamtan, where that was in the middle of the AIDS crisis. I mean, these crises, they come and go, don't they? This was the AIDS crisis, which was decimating the population of that particular,
That's
of
right,
Africa,
yeah.
really. And we met these two lads, do you remember, called,
Of course I do, yeah.
well, what were they called?
One was called Philemon,
Yes.
and the other was called, gone, I can't remember his name, but it doesn't, it's okay.
You know, it's going to pop back in our heads in a minute.
Yeah.
But the point about these little boys, if you remember, they had lost their parents, and their grandparents, who would normally look after children, they'd got so many orphan children that they actually would send them away when it was the time. It was Laxon, the other one,
Laxon and
Philemon, and they would send them away at the time of meals because there was not enough food to go round.
The thing someone said to us was that the fabric of Africa had been torn away because of the gaps now.
Had been
You
torn.
had grandparents
Yeah.
looking after grandchildren, grandchildren on their own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a very effective metaphor, taking somewhere like Sudan that I was hearing about this morning. The fabric of that society has been torn, and survival is day by day by day. But these two little lads were very strong, weren't they? They were looking after
They
themselves.
were very determined.
Yeah, one was 8 and one was 10. I mean, they shouldn't be looking after themselves, but somehow when they showed us where they were living, they showed us round. Well, I
It was
mean,
a little half demolished hut.
it was. There wasn't a lot of showing around because there wasn't a lot of space to show around in.
And they both wanted jobs that would involve wearing uniforms.
They did. One wanted to be a policeman and one wanted to be a pilot.
Yeah. They wanted to be smart and to have a life.
Shoes.
Yeah.
And they had no shoes.
They had a little bit of support from one or two of the agencies that worked there.
Well,
in the
absolutely.
main, they were. I mean, we probably said this before, but we wondered whether to give them a football, and thought, no, you're not supposed to actually give some that. We rang our son in England that night, and he said, "Give them a football, for goodness' sake!"
I know.
Which was a very.
But I mean,
very
they
good
were
thing,
walking
so.
9 kilometres to school every morning and back every evening on no breakfast. You know, we talk about breakfast clubs, but they hadn't got any breakfast really. But getting to school was the most important thing. So I suppose there is always resilience in the human spirit.
Well, not in all of them, but in a lot.
Well, in children,
the children actually, I mean, when you hear about children who have terminal illness, they're incredibly, I'm going to say good at it, but that's ridiculous. That they do seem to find it's not even an optimism, it's a way of living right now, where if it's all right now, it may be.
Yeah.
But we started early anyway because we work with kids in care. And some of those children we used to take away to camp the ones at holiday time who couldn't go home. So almost by definition, they would be either children who weren't wanted by the family or didn't have sufficient.
Remember, we had a child stay with us for Christmas once, and he did have a present, and on the label was to the name of this child, and then from your disappointed parents.
From your disappointed
parents.
I mean,
so there's all sorts of orphan creating, isn't there? Really.
Remember the little boy who wanted to phone his mum, and I found him in the phone box, and I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm phoning my mum." And I said, "Well, is there a problem?" He said, "Well, I've asked the lady, but she doesn't know." And I said, "What have you asked her?" He said, "Well, just asked her if I could speak to my mum." And I said to him, your mum has got to. And he said, "What, like this?" I said, "No." And he had no idea. He was speaking out into the universe, hoping that there would be a mum who would have a phone. And he said,
there would be a phone.
He said, "Well, the other boys do."
Yeah.
And I don't think we'd really encountered that before, have we?
No, I suppose not really. I just that sense of abandonment.
Yeah.
But there are always heroes, aren't there? And I know that in every refugee camp and in every area in Gaza, there will be good people
Yeah,
doing their very best,
yeah, there are.
and people trying to bring aid through the most difficult of circumstances. And
People dying as a
yes,
result of that too.
yeah,
Do
yeah.
you remember when we became orphans? Remember we?
Well, yeah.
No, but I mean, it was odd because I mean, I think it was my father died first, and then my mother and your.
And then my dad, and
we,
then my
we,
mum.
we
Yeah.
suddenly, not with any great profound depth of misery because of not having parents, but because we suddenly realised we were orphans. And I remember there was a dimension of something in that was quite alien to me. The idea that suddenly particularly with my mother, I couldn't phone her any longer because she was no longer there. And we used to say, we both said, haven't we, in recent times, we'd love to be able to just pick the phone up and speak to them. And the other thing is, and I don't quite know whether I'm on the right line with this, but every now and then we have emails or contacts from people who are or have been Christians.
Mm.
And somehow they lost it.
Yes, I mean, rather like children in a swirling world becoming separated from their parents or separated from the thing that was secure. It's almost like that, isn't it? They become separated because of some crisis in their lives. The hand that they were holding isn't there anymore, and that can be the hand of God. That protection appears to have disappeared, and in that sense, they are orphaned.
Did you wonder to what extent there has been confusion in messaging about that? I mean, one of the things we do know is that we know at least one person who was picked up and kind of rescued by a Christian group, and was very grateful and was right to be, because they saved him from a lot of bad things. But later, when that group fell apart, there's a profound sense of loss for them.
Again, like a double loss.
Yeah, because it was the agent that rescued them. How you make that move from celebrating the people who did it to a sense of trust in God is really, really difficult. And using the usual mantras and giving out verses and stuff doesn't really cut much ice with a lot of people who are. And of course, you can get through years as a believer. I don't know about other faiths, but certainly as a Christian, where you see people suffering in many ways all around you, and you sorry for them, and you pray for them, and you try to help them, and then the blow hits you in a way that you've never experienced before. It's like it being punched in the solar plexus, and you think, "But I thought I was loved. I thought I was looked after." And that's after knowing that many, many people have gone through terrible things. And I don't just suspect, I feel more and more keen at the moment, I think is the word, to push through that and work out where you go from that. Because
well, we're not used to having to do that on one level, are we? Because we live in the West. We've talked about children living in areas where they have to literally push through every single day in order to eat, push through every single day in order to get to school.
Yeah.
Then nobody else is going to do it for them. They have to do it. And I don't know whether maybe it's almost more difficult because we're surrounded. I mean, I know there's crises everywhere in our country and in other countries in the West, and individual people are suffering from poverty or from other senses of abandonment. But that idea that individually you have to push through, Laxon and Philemon, they had a bush rat, didn't they? Which they had found every morning, and they used to go out very early in the morning to try to find them so they could sell one and keep one. And there wasn't a lot left of it, but they did offer us
They
some.
offered us a
Didn't they?
bit of the head.
Yes, they did. Well, I wasn't really going to go into that. But what I mean,
We
is that
politely declined.
yes, well, we did. But I mean, I'm just thinking. Do you think that it isn't just the Christian messaging? It's the messaging of our society that is that we have the right to be protected, the right to food. I mean, and rightly so. I'm not quite saying that, but because of that, when God doesn't come up trumps in the way that we want him to, there is a sense, but surely that was our right to expect as his children. Even if you know in theory that isn't the case, deep in you, if you're told you're the children of God, but somehow surely that involves comfort.
Yeah, I think it's
security.
a bit deeper than that, in the sense that people do tend to be taught the image of God as a father. The only way you measure that is by looking at
It's protection.
Either your own father or other people's fathers. And the function of a father, ideally, is to look after you and make sure bad things don't happen to you. Now,
although the function of a good father as you grow up is that a good father gives you freedom, lets you make mistakes, lets you be in the world. And somehow I think we get stuck with the children bit, because as soon as you say you're children of God, you kind of, and because Jesus said, unless you become like a child, in other words, with the eyes wide open of a curious child. So I think maybe it's certainly something that St. Paul got very worried about, didn't he? He said, you lot, you're just still wanting to stay on baby food. You don't actually want to get going in the real world. He said you spend your time talking about theories and bits and pieces, but you're not getting to grips with reality.
What is interesting is today I was trying to work out if someone said to me about this issue particularly, explain it to me. They said,
the issue,
this thing has happened to me. Something has happened to me. It's awful. It's just made me not want to have anything more to do with it. And that has happened quite a lot.
And there is no hand holding anymore.
There's just disappointment. And I was thinking about how one answers that, or not answers it, and I think the problem is, when I think back over 40 years, I can remember 5, 6, 7, 8 moments when the light shone in that.
40 years.
Whatever.
When you were 16,
yeah, that's true. No, it's more than that. Yeah. I can remember darkness, distance, really shitty times. I can remember all of that. But I also remember moments when an almost invisible revelation was there that would want to say to me, you really, really haven't understood how things are. And I look back at those things sometimes. I was thinking today about 4 or 5 of them. I've always tried to tell the truth. When I first did it, it was just fun, really. But now, telling the truth about what happens to you or doesn't happen to you, what should happen to you, seems more important than it's ever seemed. So that people aren't artificially supported, but have some kind of, not exactly a logical structure, but a relationship structure in which to place the fears and worries that they have. And it may sound as though I don't know what I'm talking about, then, but that's only because I don't. I don't have any easy answers at all for that. But I do know that there's this thing called trust is in me, and
Well,
not
and
quite sure what.
no, but I mean, if you like, it is a light that shines in the darkness, isn't it? You know, the darkness is
Yeah.
still there, but there is something, even if at times you really can't explain it or be very sure about it. And of course, as I said, it's Advent this weekend. You know, light shining in the darkness. You know that it's going to come, and
And it's worth reminding everybody, all of us, about one of the most significant and some ways strange moments in the life of Jesus shortly before he died, when he cries out, "Why have you let me down? Why have you forsaken me? Why are you no longer looking after me?"
yes, and we have said, haven't we, that we think that many people putting together the story would like to leave that out. And I think, and I think that there are many times when the church would like to leave it out, and when we would like to leave it out. We don't want that as part of our story, but it's there. It is part of the story.
Most people who push on will find at some point in their lives, they will say something very similar.
Yeah.
Where have you gone? And I think it's worth the push and worth the going.
You get up in the morning and you walk your 9 kilometers to school.
Yeah.
You go out in the morning and you find your bush rat, and you look forwards. I don't know. It's a bit of a complicated.
A little bit more to say about that, I think.
Anyway. Yes, I know, but maybe we need to think about that a little bit and pray for Sudan, as well as everywhere else.
Right. Okay. Yes. Well, after that endless conversation, we'll leave you to it. We'll see you next week.
Bye. Bye.